Great, welcome everyone. My name's Dan here. I'm on the senior team at eShop, and I'll be taking you through forms this afternoon. One of my favourite features of eShop that I like to make sure everyone has a full and thorough understanding of. So the purpose of today's session is both a combination of practical and best practice, whereby I'm going to give you an overview of the various features that are available through our forms functionality. We'll then look at some best practices as well, and with time permitting, we'll then look at some use cases and a Q&A as well. So it is a public session, but I do have a colleague here behind the scenes. So if anything comes up as we go through the session where you'd like to know something specific, then please ask away using the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure any specific queries that you have get answered either through the chat, or indeed if it's something that we need to look at in detail, then I can build it into the session. But there should be plenty of time for everyone to be able to ask any questions you want, because the most important thing from a session like this is that you get the understanding that you need and indeed would like to be able to use eShop effectively. So when I say today's session is about forms, I just want to highlight some jargon aspects to the setup within eShop, because we do find sometimes that customers get confused between the different features that we offer and how they work. So the session today will be focused on sign-up forms, but I'm going to talk about preference centers in relation to sign-up forms, and indeed we have another feature called landing pages. And before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the training itself, I just want to explain those three things. So what you'll find, and just so you know, you will only be able to see this if you are a administrator of the function, but we have sign-up forms, landing pages, and preference centers all nested under the forms menu in the left-hand side navigation of eShop. Okay, so you only see that menu if you're an administrator of either the sub account or the account, and that's because obviously these are some pretty sensitive functions that control, how people subscribe and indeed unsubscribe from your accounts, and therefore come with a certain level of trust when it comes to managing contact data and making sure we stay compliant with things like the GDPR. So what we'll do is look at all three of these in tandem, but as I say, the main focus of the training is on the sign-up form itself. But just to explain all three, the sign-up form is used for adding new subscribers and for other data capture purposes. Okay, so the sign-up form itself is how you get subscribers into eShop. Okay, now they look very, very similar to preference centers, which is where people can then self-serve with their data and subscription management options. So very simply, the sign-up form helps them to sign up in the first place, and then a preference center helps them to amend those subscriptions. Okay, so through a preference center, people can amend both the data that you hold about them and indeed the options of things that they've opted into through the preference center. So if you have a sign-up form, it's important to have a preference center as well. I'm a big fan of having lots of sign-up forms, and we'll talk about that more as we go through the session, but you can only have one preference center in a sub account. So it tends to be, the preference center tends to be something that we set and forget as part of the setup, but we'll talk about the interdependencies between the two a little bit later in the session. So let's say sign-up form, subscriber comes in in the first place. Preference center, they can then change the data that we hold about them. Last but no means least, we then have the landing page function, which can be used to host eShop sign-up forms and other simple content and links. Okay, so there are form embedding options, which we'll again look at later in the session, where you can actually put a sign-up form on your own website or in various other places. But we find sometimes that can be challenging for customers, either because their website CMS doesn't offer the relevant functionality, or if we've got any central government customers with us today, quite often you are using gov.uk, which has some pretty strict rules around embedding things. So the landing page is a way in which we put a vanity URL on your form. Effectively, it's hosted on something which kind of links back to your domain, and it enables us to top and tail the sign up form. So the landing page, quite simply, put your branding at the top and at the bottom, add some extra text, and then the sign up form goes in the middle of that. Okay, so you would create a sign up form to get people to sign up, and then if you're not able to embed that on your website, or you want more control over the design of the form, then you use a landing page to effectively add the window dressing to the sign up form. Okay, so just want to make sure you're aware that there are those three features, and there is some interdependencies between them. As I say, the main focus for today is going to be on the sign up form itself, because there's quite a lot to them, and hopefully over the next few minutes I will give you a good understanding of the features and functionality that are available to you there. Okay, so one last thing on that, I'm not sure if we've got anybody specific on this session today with one, but on the more advanced versions of eShop, we do offer something called global sign-up forms and a global preference center, and that's where you can link sub-accounts together. So if you do have a setup where you have multiple sub-accounts, either for different departments or brands, then you can create what we call a global sign-up form and preference center, which is where your subscribers can sign up and indeed manage data across the whole organization. That is one of the more sophisticated areas of eShop. So we won't be covering that in detail today, but just want to make you aware that that does exist as well. So if you see options when in your version of eShop for global sign up form, that's what it means. It's because there is the ability to link the different sub accounts within eShop. So let's have a look at the form builder itself, which is where you would probably spend the majority of your time if you were creating a sign up form. And what I'll do, I'm going to start with just a kind of basic run through of the feature itself and show you how to create one. And then we'll look at some of the best practices and indeed the customizations of that form. So the first thing to be aware of is there's quite a lot to consider for building a form beyond the form itself. Okay, there are branding considerations, and then the main thrust after that is what happens after someone submits the form, because when they submit the form, we need to confirm to them that they have submitted the form. That's a really important part of the user journey, so that they go, okay, did that actually submit? We then have an opt-in email, usually with a double opt-in version of the forms, which is triggered off the back of that. And that is an email that a subscriber must interact with to become part of your database, because we're asking them to confirm that they do want to opt in. That in turn leads to another page called the final confirmation, which is where we then kind of confirm to them, yes, not only did you ask to subscribe and you were sent the email, you've now clicked the link in that and you are a subscriber. And then subsequent to that, we have an optional step to actually create a welcome email, which is then, if you like, the first piece of, well, for want of a better word, marketing literature that you can send to your new subscriber. And then last but not least, we have the publishing options, which give you various different tools for being able to do something with that form as far as your website is concerned and other places. So what I'm going to do at this juncture is I'm just going to bring up an actual live working version of eShop, which should be on the screen now. And we'll also make it a little bit bigger so no one has to go cross-eyed. And then I'm just going to build a very simple form using the form builder in eShop. So I'm just going to run through that list of considerations with you and show you how easy it can be. But then obviously we'll look at how sophisticated you might want to make it if you want to customize some of those options. So as I say, in the forms menu, you have the sign up forms option. When you first go to that page, it's going to show you a list of the sign up forms that are already available in that account. It's going to tell you the name. It's going to tell you when it was created. Now, this is a demo account, so there's not actually much going on in here, but it is going to give you some other insights as to what's been going on with this form, including the number of people who have completed the double opt-in process, etc., etc. But what we're going to do for the purposes today is we're going to create a new sign up form. So just go to this option in the top right hand corner here, and it's going to present you with three options: double opt-in, single opt-in, and SMS. And we'll talk a little bit more about the choice architecture there in a minute. So for the purposes of this, I'm just going to call this training demo. Now, if you want to, you can give it a more detailed description as well, if there's something specific that other users of your account, or indeed you, if you forget, need to know about this form, and you just simply press new. What you're then presented with is that form builder dialog. So the various options that I talked through just now, and it is a step-by-step process. So you work your way down each page, and then you work across to the next tab. That's the way this piece of the UI for this feature is configured. It's kind of like a bit of a kind of wizard-like process. Okay, so the first thing we need to think about is the sign-up form itself, and there's a lot to consider here. Firstly, we have the data fields. In other words, what pieces of information we ask for on the form. Now, on the email-based forms, the minimum requirement is an email address. So we must ask for an email address, otherwise someone can't fill in the form. And then what we can then do is select from other fields in our account that we might want to add to the form. Okay, so the common one is first name. You should see there's the first name field, and if I check that box, it will add it to the right hand side. I also then have the option of making the field required. In other words, I force people to fill it in. They won't be able to submit the form without filling it in. Okay, so we have those two checkbox options, and then I can find other fields as well. So if I want to just narrow down my selection, if you do have a lot of custom fields in your account, as this demo account does, then you can search for the field that you want there and then add it. And then we'll just add one more. Let's ask for someone's birthday, which is a bit random, but just for the purposes of demonstration, that's fine. And then what you can also do, now you've got the fields that you want on the right hand side, is you can reorder them. Okay, so if we wanted to ask for the birthday first, then we can put that to the top of the list there, although probably more likely I'd say a normal order would be first name, then last name, then email address, and then birthday. Okay, so you see it's quite malleable, and you can move those around and indeed add more fields as you see fit. Okay, next thing we want to do is to choose where the subscribers are written to when they submit this form. Okay, and there's various different options that we can take with this, both where we describe them as being visible to the user or hidden from the user. Okay, so visible to the user would typically be where you want to give your new subscribers a selection of checkboxes that they can sign up to. So in this example, I'm going to pick the general newsletter, leisure and community, and policy updates. Okay, those three things will be available on my form then for people to subscribe to. Now, if this form is just for a singular subscription, what you might consider doing is not actually putting those things in there at all, and instead just adding the general newsletter to the hidden things. And all that's going to do is it's going to mean that people don't actually have to check a box, because effectively they're going to sign up to the single newsletter anyway. So it just kind of streamlines the customer journey a little bit. But for the purposes of today, I'm just going to go back again, general newsletter, leisure and community, policy updates. Okay, so we've now got those three fields, that selection of preferences, and again we can reorder how those appear on the form if we see fit. By default they'll go into alphabetical order. Now we then have groups. Okay, now one thing to be aware of is everybody who subscribes to any eShop form will automatically go into a website group, and that's just part of our housekeeping routines to make sure that we can keep tabs on where subscribers have come from. Okay, you may be aware if you import data into eShot, there's a really robust audit mechanism there, and automatically writing people to the website group is the way we help, which in part audit things from a form perspective. But we can add our own groups to the forms as well. And the typical use case with this is, let's say you can have lots of forms. You might want to keep tabs on who comes from specific forms. So it's not something that you're asking people to opt into, but you see there I have a hidden group. And what that means is when someone's going to be given the options to sign up to the general newsletter, Leisure and Community, or the policy updates preferences, but when they submit the form, I'm going to write them to that hidden group as well so that I know where they came from. You also have the ability to add a consent statement to the form, which is considered as best practice. So I'll touch on that a little bit more later on. It is optional here. If you are doing forms for internal comms purposes, then you might not need that, but you can add a consent statement to your form. And indeed, you can change the headings. Okay, so by default, the contact details section, where the data fields that people fill in, is called contact details. The preferences is called preferences, and groups is called groups. But you might want to change them to other labels if it makes those titles more meaningfully. So you could say, your contact information, for example. So last but not least, we then have the ability to customize the sign up button text. So you can have a call to action on the sign up form of whatever you like. However, sign up form would be regarded as best practice. The other usual suspect there would be something like the word subscribe. Okay, so it's the action that someone takes at the end of the form. So as I say, that is the configuration of the form itself, but that is just the first step in a 7-step process that we have for configuring the form. Harry, have we got any questions before I move on, just in case there's anything that's caused any confusion there?
No questions in the chat at the moment, no.
Okay. Let's say, if there's anything I say which you'd like further clarification on, then please feel free to ask away, and we'll make sure we don't confuse anybody, because this is one of the more kind of involved areas of eShot in terms of the amount of configuration and functionality that exists there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save and continue those options, and then it's going to ask me to make some simple choices as to how my form looks, which again are very involved, but for the purposes of simple training for today, I'm just going to go with the basics. I could upload a logo, but normally you'll find that your master logo will be configured in your branding section, and therefore if I just check that box, then you see there it's automatically pulled in the eShot logo, and then you can change the color of your form as well. We have control over the top strip and indeed the links and buttons, but I'm going to leave everything black for today. The upload CSS function, that is advanced functionality where if you had your own CSS and you were keen for the form to very closely mimic the styling of your website, then we can add custom CSS to the form as well, but that is something I would not play around with unless you know what you are doing. Then we save and continue to the next step, which is the confirmation page. Okay, so someone has filled in the form, they've hit that subscribe or sign up button, and then we want to reassure them that that form submission has been received. Sometimes you'll see with website forms, you hit submit and you're like, I'm not sure if anything's actually happened. What will happen is with eShot forms, someone will be redirected, okay? And there's a choice of where you redirect them to. You could redirect them to your home page, or indeed you could create a custom page thanking them for their subscription. Or if you want to do things simple, then you can change it from the redirect to URL option to show a simple thank you message. By default, we have some text there, which you're very welcome to amend, but it kind of does the job for you. As I say, that's the basics, but that's an important thing to make sure that they're reassured that their form has been filled, that they have submitted the form. And the other really important thing that it then does is it says, we've just sent you an email asking you to confirm your subscription. Please click on the button in the email to confirm, okay? They will not become a subscriber if they don't do that as far as a double opt-in form is concerned, which is the example I'm using today. If you had selected a single opt-in form when you created a form, then those confirmation and opt-in email steps wouldn't be visible, but they are with double opt-in. Next, we save and continue again. And this time we're sending that email. Okay, so they've filled in the form, they've hit sign up, we've shown them that confirmation message, we've told them to go and find the email and click on the link in it to confirm their subscription, but now we actually need to send that email. Okay, so in the same way as you have when you configure newsletters and other single send campaigns from eShot, you can control who the email appears to be from. You can do the same here, and there'll be a drop down list to give you a list of the identities that exist on your account, or indeed you can manually type one in. So who is this email going to appear to be from? We can then change the email content. Okay, and in this case, again, we can actually design an email, which I'll come back to a little bit later on, but again, for the purposes of teaching you the basics to begin with, we'll just stick with the standard email. So you can customize the subject line, you can customize the email body, and indeed you can customize the message itself. But again, this is all best practice text, so I would say ordinarily, if you want to use this version, then tweak it rather than change it completely. But you do have control over all of these elements. And again, you see how we're using the word subscribe there. We could edit the text to say something else like confirm your subscription, whatever you want. And that is the email that they will get asking them to confirm their subscription. Okay. Now, we then have another optional configuration here, which is to resend the opt-in email to unconfirmed contacts. All right. Now, the reason we have a double opt-in is to prevent form spam predominantly, but people can make mistakes and what have you, or indeed they might just miss the email. Okay, so this option gives you the ability to resend the email, and typically that will default to 1 day, and I would usually say leave it on that setting unless you have a specific reason to make the interval longer. But what will effectively happen is we will send them that opt-in email, and then we'll wait 24 hours in this case. And if they don't click on it, then basically the email is going to trigger again with it being prefixed with the word reminder to just highlight to them that they haven't yet confirmed their subscription. You can only do that once. We don't allow for multiple kind of nagging people to confirm their subscription. And what I would say is, if you do see that there's a kind of drop off between the number of form fills you have and the number of double opt-ins, 9 times out of 10 it will be because of things like form spam or errors with the email address that's been submitted. Okay, so that is optional, but you can have another go at trying to get people to do the double opt-in if you so wish. Save and continue on to the next step. And similarly to the confirmation page when they first submitted the form, now they've clicked on the link in the email to confirm their subscription. Again, we can do the same thing. Thank you for confirming you've successfully signed up, and we hope that you'll find information useful and informative. What you can also do at that point is drive people to update their preferences. Okay, we'll talk about that more when we come to the best practices session in a minute as well, because there is some methods to the madness and kind of, well, you've just filled in a form, why would you drive me back to another form? But I'll explain that more in a minute. Okay, so show a thank you message, configure the text, and again with that final confirmation step, you do have the ability to redirect to your own page if you see fit. Then we have another optional step, which is the welcome email. Okay, the welcome email, quite simply, now they are actually a confirmed subscriber, you have the option of triggering what we affectionately call an autoresponder to everyone who's signed up, and that will typically be either advising them what's going to happen next, or indeed, again, we have the opportunity to send an email instead of the standard email. We can actually choose an email design, and I'll come back again, like I said, to that across all these kind of customized emails in a minute. We have the ability to effectively send them something after they've signed up. Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of configuration and a lot of choices that you can make as you go through the sign up form process. But if you are looking to keep it simple and start with the basics, then typically I would say use our standard emails and messages to begin with. And once you get used to and happy with the functionality, it might be the sort of thing that you then customize. Once you've finished all that, you save and continue. And what eShot's going to do is it's then going to let you have a look at this sign up form that you've just created. Okay, just before I do that, I'm just going to save it. And you see there the hosted URL for the sign up form. Okay, if I click on that link, it will open in a new window and you'll see there how it's got those fields that I selected. It's then got those preferences that I added to the form, and it's got the button which says sign up. Okay. So if you get to this point and you're like, oh, actually, I'm not happy with that, then you can go back and change things. So we can bounce back to the sign up form bit, and we might say, actually, we don't want to ask for the birthday anymore. And we're going to change that sign up form button to subscribe instead. Save and continue, go back to publish, save it. And then if I go back to the form, you'll see there now the words changed of the subscribe button, and indeed the birthday one has disappeared. So you can go through a kind of iterative process of configuring the form, making sure you're happy with it, getting to the point where everything is as it should be. Okay. So that's the basic process of setting up a sign up form. Now, what I would say is everyone on the session will hopefully have their own dedicated testing or training sub accounts. If you are new to this functionality, go and play with it. Please be careful if you are using a production environment and you are messing around with existing forms, because obviously there's a danger you could break something that's actually in use. So the thing with sign up forms is they are live. There's not this kind of concept of staging. As soon as you make changes to the form, the live form that's wherever it might be hosted is then publishable. It's published straight away. Okay, so just be careful when you're amending forms. If you're ever in any doubt in terms of what you're doing, but you are working with something that's existing, what you might want to consider is, you see where I've created that training demo form there. What I would probably do is, if I said, right, well, we need to update that form, but before I get to the point where I publish the new one, I need to go through some review process internally, but that one is currently live at the moment. All I would probably do in that situation is I would clone the existing form. So you see there, training demo clone. That's going to give it a completely new URL. Go make the relevant changes that you want to make, and only at the point where you're happy do you then flip it to the new form in a production environment. I think I saw the little thingy bounce up and down. So do we have a question? What is the process if people are already part of a contact group on Outlook? Do we still need them to fill out a sign up form internally? So if someone is already in your eShot account and you and they fill in a form, then effectively the new values that they submit on the form will overwrite and update their existing values. Okay, so email address will typically act as a unique identifier, and therefore if someone completes the sign up form process and they are already in your subscriber database, they're going to overwrite that data. Now, if it is a case, Hannah, of the people that you're dealing with are already in your database and you're looking for them to make changes to the data that you hold about them, that's back to what I said at the beginning. That's the difference between a sign-up form and a preference center. The sign-up form being where they subscribe as new, and the preference center then being where they can then amend those options. So if I just go and have a look at a preview of the preference center in this sub account, it's different from the sign up form. And this is one of the interesting things, is we can ask for different information on the preference center. But in this scenario, this is where someone amends their data as opposed to signs up in the first place. But eShot is pretty kind of safe in that respect. If someone fills in a sign up form and they've just forgotten that they actually were already a subscriber, it's not going to mess anything up. It's just obviously that new form subscription is going to be treated as the most recent and accurate data and update the values accordingly. So quite a lot of forms, as you can see there, and as I say, getting used to the functionality would be a case of going into your test account, creating a test form, going through these options, thinking about them. One of the most challenging aspects of this is actually thinking about what you want to say, what sort of options you want on the form and things like that, and get used to the functionality. But think through the subscriber process before you kind of start building. But as you can see, it's very malleable and there's a lot of configuration options in there for you. So we've built the sign up form and we've done the basics. Now let's look at how we may perhaps make things even better. Okay, so there are a number of things that I would recommend as sign up form best practices. The first one is to use a simple sign up form. What we've seen time and again is less fields and less options equals more subscriptions. I would strongly recommend about never going over the 10 field kind of level. You really do see response rates drop off a cliff if you go beyond 10. The only thing that eShop absolutely requires is an email address. So you can have fields with just one with just one field, but obviously if you have more on that, then just be careful about not asking people for too much information, because they will then become less inclined to fill in the form where you're asking for so much information. As you saw when we looked at it, we also have that option to make things mandatory, and it really depends on the use case. Okay, so if you're just offering a newsletter subscription, it would be something where you keep it quite light. If you are dealing with professional audiences, then I would certainly say best practice would be capturing a value for the company that they look after. I do see a lot of forms nowadays that insist on people using their work email address to be able to sign up things. I would recommend against that. I think it's a real barrier to entry, and I'm sure I'm not alone in having the odd kind of disposable Gmail address where I sign up to things to kind of be able to keep all those funky newsletters that I've signed up to separate from my corporate inbox, which is a busy place at the best of times. The other thing we can do with those forms and those fields is we can add what we call pick lists to a field, okay? And that means you can control the options that are available to someone on that form, okay? So in this example, we've got a field called House, and we're going to limit the selection to Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, okay? So that's really good when the reason that you're asking for data is to give you future segmentation capability, okay? Because that avoids any kind of spelling mistakes or situations where people put abbreviations or things which make it more difficult for you to use the data for targeting and analysis. So if there is a structured set of responses that you want to a field, then you might want to consider using a pick list in the contacts field manager. As I've mentioned a couple of times already, what we regard as sign up form best practice is using double opt-in. As we saw when we had the first kind of creation of the sign up form, we have those options for a double opt-in, a single opt-in, and indeed an SMS form if you are using the SMS functionality on the platform. The reason I recommend double opt-in, well, the many reasons I recommend double opt-in, is it protects you from form spam. Okay, what we know is, because we see it every day, is automated processes will try and attack your forms and submit thousands of submissions to them. And if you imagine something like, well, you're sat there kind of looking at new subscribers and you've got a list full of rubbish, then that's going to be difficult for you to manually clean up, whereas the double opt-in is a pretty robust way of making sure that if they manage to fill in the form, because it's a robot, it certainly can't get the email, and it certainly can't get to the clicking the link to confirm the subscription. The other weird thing is, unfortunately, people often make spelling mistakes in their own email address when they're filling forms in. So obviously, it avoids situations again where we pollute your database with erroneous email addresses. And last but not least, it helps with inbox placement. Now, what do I mean by that? Unfortunately, in this cybersecurity conscious world in which we now live, it is very common for emails to go to folders like junk or other by default. So, this is the first email that you're ever going to send to someone. All right. So if you use single opt-in and someone signs up to your newsletter, and the first time you send them that newsletter is a week later or a month later, they're not necessarily looking out for it. And therefore, the chances of them engaging with that email are much lower. Okay. So as I say, by default, because their email system goes, oh, I've never seen this subscriber, I've never seen emails from this sender before, it puts it into junk or somewhere other than the primary inbox. Okay, because the double opt-in instructs someone to go and seek out the email and confirm the subscription, and it really is almost an instantaneous process from the point where they've filled in the form. Even if it is somewhere where you don't want it in their inbox, they're likely to find it because they're going to go and look for it there and then. And when they find it, most applications will prevent people from clicking on links that are in junk folders and things like that. They can pull the email from junk to the inbox, and then they can interact with it. And guess what? That teaches their mail system that you are a sender that they want to hear from, and therefore future emails should be placed in the inbox. Okay, so it's really good to protect them, but it's also very good to protect you and ensure that you've only got subscribers that really want your emails in your database. And yeah, obviously, I have seen it, I don't want to scare anyone, but I have seen it where we've seen single opt-in forms targeted with malicious email addresses that are designed to cause deliverability issues. Bless them. Now, another best practice that I would always recommend is to include those privacy statements and links. Okay, so if we look at the legal side of things, when you collect personal data from the individual it relates to, Article 13 of the UK GDPR says that you must provide them with privacy information at the time when personal data is obtained. Okay, so the time at which personal data is obtained is on the submission of the form. Okay, and that's why, if you remember, on the form we had the option to add the consent statement and information. I would highly recommend that you use that unless there's a reason not to, and typically that can just link to your usual privacy policy. However, if you want to do it properly, in this example, one of our not one of ours, but one of our customers, the Department of Health and Social Care, they have a specific email subscription privacy notice on gov.uk, which details in a really good way what they're doing with your data, and citing the fact that it is hosted by us. Okay, so that for me represents absolute best practice, and if you'd like the link to that privacy policy so you can kind of consider your own version, then by all means give me a shout afterwards and I'll share that with you. So using a simple sign-up form, protecting your database with double opt-in, including privacy statements and links to make sure we are compliant. Now we get on to some of the things which will help to make your sign-up form journey even better. Okay, customizing those confirmation messages and emails. If you remember when we went through the builder, I went with the system defaults. Yep, show a thank you message. Yep, send the standard email. Okay, but you don't have to leave those options configured with the basics. What you can do instead is actually use your own messages. Okay, so if we go back to that third step, the confirmation page, instead of showing a thank you message, if we instead of showing the thank you message, we could drive them to a landing page. If we go to the next step of the process, which is that standard email, what we can do instead is change it to using an email design. Okay, so when we change it to using an email design, there's something specific and important that you need to do. All right, and I'll show you this in the product again in a second, but effectively we need to make sure that email has this special dynamic link in it. star sign up confirmation URL star, okay, because that puts in a special link which is unique to that individual for them to confirm that subscription. It creates a kind of a tokenized unique tracking string so that we can identify the contact in question. Okay, so it's a really good idea to make these emails look great, because in the same way we talked about the inbox placement aspect of it, this is your first chance to make a great impression on a new subscriber. So you'll see here Surrey County Council, they have a very, very popular newsletter called Surrey Matters, and their confirmation email looks like this. This is one of their own designs. And it's really good because it's very clear who it's from, and it starts to not just from a technical perspective train the subscriber what to expect, but visually as well. Oh, I recognize this, it aligns with the form that I was just on, this is legitimate. Okay, similar from the National Audit Office, again a nice clean simple email, confirm my sign up. Now please don't confuse this email to be something that you can start kind of getting into newsletter content, because we are still at that point where we haven't actually made sure that this is a legitimate subscriber at the moment. This is the first email we sent to them, and we need them to click that confirm my sign up button before they become part of the database. But again, adding your branding to those emails, I would say is best practice, because then it helps to reassure someone that it's legitimate. Okay. And if we just go and look at that inside eShop for a minute, I just want to go back to the sign up form that I created earlier. As a step 3, when we configured it the first time, we had to show a thank you message, but we can redirect to URL instead and put a link in there. And I will leave that as is for now because we haven't got one. And then when we go to the opt-in email step, you'll see there we have the email content. Instead of the standard email, we can flip it to the choose email design. Okay. Now, as I say, it must have that special link in it. And when I choose a design, if there aren't any emails configured in your account with that special link, then you'll get this kind of no records found thing here. So if you do want to do this, it's something you have to configure before you get to the form. Okay. So we'll just quickly go and look at that in the design section. I'm just going to create a new design. I'm going to call it forms training confirmation. Continue. Launch Smart Editor. And then for most customers where you've been through our full onboarding, if you've had us do your kind of initial forms and setup, we will have created a custom email for you. If we haven't, then unless my demo environment has gone wrong, we have a confirmation. Oh, sorry, that is the wrong one. Where's it gone? Perils of the live demo. We do normally have a confirmation email template. I'll go and use this one anyway, just for giggles, so it doesn't quite say the right thing. But what I need to do is add in a button, and on that button, say star sign up confirmation URL star. Okay, so admittedly I'm cutting corners today because it's just a training session. I would obviously spend a little bit more time doing this neatly and properly ordinarily. Save and close that. Go back to the form. Have a moment of panic where I think, will this actually work? And go to the email confirmation. Go back to choose an email design. Choose the design. And oh, sods law, it's gone wrong. What did I do wrong, Harry?
I think it might be you don't have a subject line and identity to the design.
There we go. This is why Harry's here, because I always to pick up on my mistakes. We've come this far. Edit details. Yes. Very well spotted, Harry. Oh, it's got an identity, but you're right. I skipped over the Confirm your subscription. Continue. Back to design list. Forms. Edit. Opt-in email. Email content. Choose an email design. Choose design. Oh, there we go. Someone who will die after this training session has deleted my demo design, which yes, we will address subsequent to this session. So apologies for this, but ordinarily there is a sign up confirmation email in this demo account which has disappeared today. So I tried to cover it and have failed miserably. But when you've configured it properly, you can choose it from the email content section and then pick that design from the list. And if it was configured properly and working there, it would appear. So it is best practice, but it's equally optional. And if you get stuck like I have, then just jump on the live chat and the team will help you. Let's look at a couple of other best practices, moving very swiftly on. Including a welcome email, I would also regard as a best practice, because again, it is that kind of, we've got a new subscriber now. It's a great chance to make a further first impression or a second impression as such. So if you remember, that step 6, send a welcome email on completion of the sign up process. Okay, this is the honeymoon period. You know, these emails see great levels of engagement because this is the time when you have a new subscriber, and it's a good chance to start signposting them to what they can expect from you further on. One thing I would say, try and make sure that the emails have evergreen content in it, because obviously it's something that's just going to continue to run. So therefore, it's your second chance to make a great first impression. By now that they are confirmed and into your database, there are lots of fantastic things that you're going to send them. But again, back to that principle before, like I said, when you have a new email subscriber, it may be, if your newsletter cycle is monthly, for example, it might be some weeks until they're going to actually get their first piece of content from you. So now we've gone through the kind of functional aspects of getting them to confirm their subscription. This is a chance to then start to show off some of your best content to them. The other thing we can do then with that, if you remember that, kind of drive them back to the preferences piece, is we can encourage them to sign up to more preferences. Okay, so if you remember, we had the final confirmation message there, update preferences. If our sign up form, I mean, in this particular example, obviously I put the 3 options, but let's say this one was one where we'd just gone with just a sign up to the general newsletter, because we wanted, again, back to that principle of not overwhelming people with choice on the form. Sign up to our newsletter here. Fantastic. Now you've signed up to the newsletter. Did you know there's actually all these other cool things that you can subscribe to? Okay, so that's where driving people back to update their preferences, either with the final confirmation with the final confirmation message, and indeed the welcome email, helps you to get richer subscriber data. The other thing you can do there, and this is where we call upon the preference center again, you might have just asked for the email address in the form, but in the preference center we can ask them for more information, like that birthday field that we had in there originally. Okay, so you get a second bite of the cherry, getting people to give you more information. Last, sorry, that's an example of a more kind of sophisticated form with lots and lots of options to sign up to, which might be a bit big and scary for the form, but we can do it through the preference center. Last option to consider from a best practice perspective then is linking to a welcome series. Okay, the welcome email, that's just a autoresponder, that's a one-off. But do you remember when we put that form together with in the sign up form stage, we added the hidden group. The hidden group can be used to trigger an automation. Okay, so this is where sign up forms don't just need to be used for signing up to newsletters. They can actually be used to sign up to very specific programs of communication. For example, signing up for an event, for a consultation, for something where we want to take them through a linear journey. For the last few weeks, I've been helping one of our customers in the NHS to configure a pre and postnatal journey. So the sign up effectively puts you into a whole series of emails, which then educate parents to be about the various prenatal support services that are available to them through the NHS. So the use cases are myriad, but I just want to make the point that these sign-up forms can be used for things beyond just a simple kind of subscription form to a newsletter. So very simply, when you've put something like the group hidden from the user, that group can then be used as the trigger point for an automated series. If you're not familiar with automated series, we offer an entirely different training session on that, because there's a whole bunch of information on that tool to itself. But I always want to make sure with these best practice sessions, we kind of talk about the art of the possible, and therefore, do you want to have a sign-up form for new subscribers to just send your newsletters to, or do you want a sign-up form to take people through a very specific set of communications? And so there's so many different use cases for that. So that takes us through the use cases. There's just some expanded aspects to what we then do with the form that I want to talk to you about. Okay, we have the form. We've perfected it. We've configured all those steps. What are we going to now do with it? There are three options that we tend to look at for the form itself. We can embed it in your website. We can put it on what we call a pop-up, or sometimes referred to as a lightbox, or indeed, as I say, we can house it inside one of our landing pages. So let's just look at a few of those use cases. On our own website, we have a pop-up, which does have a bit of a customization at the top to initiate a phone call. But after that, that's just one of our forms where we have the email address, the field, and what we call send a button on that, because it's sending a message. But that's a sign up form embedded inside a pop-up. In a pop-up embedded on our website. If we look at some of the other things that are possible there, this is Surrey County Council. When you're on their website, they have what we call a proactive pop-up, which will drive people's attention to the fact that they have a subscription to Surrey Matters, and you can open the sign-up form from that pop-up as well. So as I say, the journey is quite malleable and can be structured in different ways. This is an example of one of our sign-up forms embedded on the council website. So the real benefit of doing it that way is obviously it looks like it's part of the website and it's all kind of following their styling. And again, that's something which can be extensive or short. So that is from the technical perspective where it gets a little bit big and scary, because what you're then going to want is the embed code. Okay, so you've got the hosted URL, but then we've also got the sign up form code that you will host. Okay, I don't want to talk through this in any particular detail today, because what you need to do here really does vary depending on your website. So rather than train you all on it generically, what I would say is if you do want our sign up forms embedded on your website, you're going to need to have access to your website CMS. You're going to need to know what to do under the hood of the website. But the code that you need to be able to embed that form is located on the publish step, which is step 7 there. Okay, and we need both JavaScript and indeed some HTML embedded on the device. Sorry, embedded on the website. So we can pop up a form, we can lightbox it. The lightbox can can be a form itself, or it can drive someone to another form. And I say what we can also then do is embed the forms on our own landing pages. So this is an example for the National Archives. And what this offers, which is, if you like, different from the form journey in itself, firstly, it offers the vanity URL. Okay, so the form is actually on their URL as opposed to ours. Secondly, it lets them have a little bit more freedom in terms of the branding and the other bits that are available. So you may have noticed when I created the form, it goes straight into the form, whereas with a landing page, we can have a title, we can have descriptive text, and we can have, do things like have a footer as well. So again, it kind of depends on the use case. If you can't embed, or indeed don't want to embed your sign up form on your website, what I would typically recommend is that you use our landing pages instead. And again, here's one we prepared earlier, just to explain it very briefly. As I say, this is, I'm always conscious of information overload on these things, so we can teach you about landing pages and preference centers separate from today's session. But just so you understand how that manifests itself, I've got the landing page configured here, and the call to action part of the landing page is where I've actually included the sign up form that I've created inside it. Okay, so as I say, it's acting as a wrapper around the sign up form. One thing I like to touch on in these sessions, because I do find it's a source of confusion to some customers, is the difference between groups and preferences. We quite often get, well, should I use a group or should I use a preference? And unfortunately, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to achieve as to whether you should use groups or preferences. However, if we just focus on the fundamentals for today, a preference is for when you have a self-service list where the subscriber is in control of what they want to receive. In other words, you're not going to decide what you send to them. The subscribers themselves are going to decide what they subscribe to. Then you have groups, which is where you are then more in control of deciding who you send things to. However, what you can do is, in a scenario where you, say, for example, offer a selection of subscriptions, you can then use the groups function to then offer your subscribers a further list of choices for a second dimension to their preferences. Now, what do I mean by a second dimension? Let's look at an example. Here I have a sign-up form for Sefton Council. We have a few fields at the top. We then have the preferences. So we have options here. We can have all news, we can have education, we can have events, lots of good choices in terms of the subscription options that they offer. But what they also like to do is they like to regionalize or more to the point, geographically target their subscribers, and therefore they use the groups function to then ask people where they live. Okay, and that is a more sophisticated use of the sign-up form, whereby you are combining both, the preferences of, this is what I'm interested in, and then the groups, and this is where I live, to be able to give you some quite sophisticated targeting options as far as what your subscribers have available to you. Okay, so it is possible to input preferences and groups on a sign-up form, and they can be used in very similar ways. But as I said, by default, the preferences are for when you want to give people options to sign up for things, and groups typically would be for things that are hidden away from the subscribers themselves, where you're controlling who's in and out of various different newsletter lists. One important point to make: there is no limit to the number of sign-up forms you can create in eShop. Okay, and the reason that's important, you may have noticed when I created the sign-up form, we had a nice little automatic QR code in the top right-hand corner. So it's really, really useful for you to be able to measure the performance of where new subscribers are coming to. So, for example, for a council recently, we've discovered that actually they get an awful lot of subscribers from notice boards in their libraries. How do we know that? Because each library has its own form, and the QR code that's on the sign on the notice board is unique to them. So we're able to see and track that data, which, if I go back into eShop very briefly and pop across to another demo environment, forms, you'll see then you get that tracking of how many opt-ins there have been, and indeed how many QR code signups there have been from each. So there's no limits. More signups equals more contacts. It also means you can start to attribute where your subscribers will come from. It gives you more knowledge of where things are going. So if you've got a single sign-up form on your account at the moment, what you might want to consider is creating clones of that sign-up form and then choosing them to put them in different places so you can get a better idea of where people are coming from. And that's it for today. and somehow I've used the full hour. I was really expecting us to have a good 5-10 minutes for Q&A. If you've got to dash, then thank you very much for joining me. But if you do want to ask any more questions, or indeed, Harry, if we've got any that you want me to go through, then I can do a bit of Q&A for the next few minutes.